Gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. I think it's about 4:01 p.m. Marie, if you could go ahead and do the roll call to establish the quorum for the minutes.
I can. All right, here. Eric Housley.
Here.
Arvin Nishal. Barb Franco.
Here.
Courtney Garcia.
Here.
Danielle Barreca.
Here.
Greg Bennett.
Here.
Perfect. Hector Gallegos.
Here.
Joshua Schultz. Josh Schultz.
Here.
Perfect. Leon Browning.
Here.
Ted Ward.
And Jordan, if you could promote Ted, he's now in the waiting area.
Ted Ward, are you present?
Present.
Welcome. Wade Woodward.
Here.
Evan Bersolini.
Here.
Sylvia Regalado Zashlad.
Oh, there she is.
I don't see Sylvia. And then Stephen Green. I don't see Stephen. Perfect. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna move now to the flag salute, and Daniela, if you could lead us in the flag salute, that would be appreciated. Daniela, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
Please
everyone-
follow me.
Yes.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
Flag.
of the United
States of America
and
and
to the republic
for
for
which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
for liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
All right, thank you. All right. Moving right along, if I could get a motion to accept today's agenda.
Well, I'd like to see the agenda first, please.
Oh, okay. It was sent out to us on Friday. Marie, do you have can you put the agenda up for Leon to look at?
Let me.
Is there anybody else that doesn't have the agenda?
Let me pull it up here. Hang on one second.
Barbara, it was sent from Julie Pressey, it looks
Right,
like.
on Friday. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It was sent Friday, because it has to be sent 72 hours before the meeting. So Julie Pressey sent the,
Okay, I didn't know that.
oh, okay. So Julie Pressey sent the agenda out, and you should have all received the link today at some early afternoon. The district's internet was down, and so it came out a little bit later than the link than it typically does.
Jordan, I just sent you the agenda. If you can display, because I'm working on 2 different devices.
Yes, 1 second.
Thank you.
Is Dr. Rosanna okay?
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that to everybody. Dr. Mercedes is participating in she's been selected to participate in a pretty prestigious program with a school back east. And so she's having to do that. She did not fly back east, but she is having to do it remotely. And so she's currently doing the sessions remotely from her house. So she was unable to join us for this meeting.
Oh, her health is good, right?
Yep, she's doing really well.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so happy.
Yep.
All right.
Chair Franco, I'll move approval of the agenda. This is Josh.
Okay, Leon, do you want to look at the agenda or?
No, that's okay. I see it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Josh to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all right, so we're ready to go. Thank you for getting that posted for us. So some of you may, like I said, if you didn't see the agenda, then the minutes were also posted in the agenda, the minutes from our September 7th meeting. And I could have, if you did not have a chance to see it, we could post that. Is that something people need to see the minutes or
No.
can we get a motion?
Not necessary.
Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the September 7th minutes of the,
So maybe.
okay, we have a motion, and do we have a second?
Wait a second.
Ted Ward on a second, and all in favor? All in
Aye.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, ready to go with all of that. Jordan, do we have any people waiting for public comment? This is that time when members of the public can address the committee regarding matters of their interest that are not on the agenda. Is there anybody out there?
We do not have any public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving right along. So today's meeting is about us learning some more information about what the waiver process is, that the district is interested in moving that direction in terms of the property, the Carneros property. So today we'll be learning more about that, and we'll be making a decision as to what to recommend to the board in terms of the waiver process. So today we'll be receiving some information, having a discussion about it, and then making a decision as a committee in terms of what our recommendation will be to the school board.
Question about that. I mean, we've already gone through the sale of the Carneros property. What's the issue?
Yeah, so Leanne, what came about, and we learned this after the fact, and we apologize for having to pull the committee back together. But we wanted to share with you an opportunity. That's why we have our legal counsel, Kelly Rem, on here, who's going to go through a short presentation to explain to you the waiver process that the school district can take on that will help makes the sale of the property easier for us to go forward with. And so we needed to convene the committee to review this waiver process, and then ultimately, as I said, or as Chair Franco mentioned, to get the approval of the committee. So you're going to learn all about this as soon as we ask Kelly Rem to go through her presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, and Rosanna sent an email out to us on September 21st outlining the process, what the waiver process means, and how it would benefit the district in terms of getting the best sale option for the property with the best terms for the property. So we're going to learn more about that today. And again, in any other reference, I don't know if we can pull Rosanna's email up or not, but she gave us a really good description of why it is in the district's best interest to submit a waiver, participate in the waiver process. And I feel.
Because I have a number of questions here.
Okay, why don't we let Kelly go ahead with her presentation, and then we'll have time, we can have a discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, Kelly, you're on.
Is there a way to
Rob,
put?
I don't know if it's Kelly or Rob, or if you're doing.
It'll be Kelly Rem representing Lozano Smith, who'll be doing the presentation.
Okay, all right.
Yes, and I was wondering if it could be displayed on the screen, and if not, I can just run through, but there were some slides. Perfect. All right. Okay, I'll go through pretty quickly because it sounds like there are questions, and we're happy to leave time for that. So this is just a quick overview of the waiver process as it relates to surplus property. So you can skip through to, I think, the third slide, which is where the actual content starts. Great. Okay, so really quick overview of the process without a waiver. I think we covered this already in prior meetings, but just as a reminder, school districts per the education code are subject to a whole slew of requirements, legal requirements, before they can sell or lease real property. The first one is exactly what we just went through, convening a 7-Eleven committee to make recommendations to the board. That's the very first step in the process, and that's why that happened. That has already occurred with regard to the Carneros property. The second step in the process is to provide certain statutory notices, and those go to other public agencies, potentially to housing sponsors, and a whole bunch of different entities that are entitled to get notice. For most of those, the notice goes out and there's a 90-day, if someone's interested in acquiring the property, there's a 90-day good faith negotiation period that you go through. Certain entities are subject to priority, et cetera, but that's kind of step 2 in the process. Step 3, then, assuming that the property is not sold under that statutory noticing process, is that the district goes out to bid. So this is kind of the big one that we're going to focus on. Generally speaking, under the education code, for a district to sell property, they're supposed to go out to competitive bid, which basically means that the school district would set all of the terms for the sale. So here's this property that's for sale. Please make us an offer in terms of price only for this deposit structure, this timeline, this closing structure, this due diligence period. So that it's very, very rigid. And then the district has to sell to the highest bid, or the purchaser making the highest bid, or not sell at all. So again, kind of a rigid process. Next slide. Can we flip to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, and so the education code also has these provisions at 33050 at SEC, which allow school districts to apply to the State Board of Education for a waiver of education code requirements. So just to be clear, this is not specific to surplus property. It actually can be used for any education code provisions that are not specifically exempt from the waiver process. Because I do a lot of property work, we most commonly see this done with surplus property, and I'll talk a little bit about why and what the advantages are. But in any case, that is where the authority to seek the waiver comes from. Next slide. Okay, so some advantages to obtaining a waiver. And just to kind of set the stage here, I do want to be clear from the outset. Having a waiver in place of certain surplus property provisions does not mean that the district just goes out, sells to whomever they want without any process whatsoever. So I'm going to talk about the specifics of what the process would look like with a waiver in place, but I do want to make sure that that's very, very clear. This is not the district saying, we want to waive all statutory requirements so that we can go out and cherry pick whoever we want to sell this property to and have no competitive process, no public transparency, et cetera. That is not at all what we're talking about, just to make that clear. But some of the advantages of obtaining a waiver include flexibility. So I talked about how rigid the competitive bid process under the statutes can be. Essentially, the district would have to come up with all of the terms except for the price. And as you can imagine, you may have buyers out there who are really interested in buying that property, but maybe they can't live with a certain timeline or other term that the district has put in place. So by getting the waiver, the district is allowed to see what buyers come up with. And they're still going to be looking at what price is offered, but they're also allowed to have flexibility in those terms. It allows for a little bit more of a partnership approach, negotiations, greater consideration of what is most desirable both for the district and the community. And then, as I'll talk about in a minute, it still maintains some public aspects of the process, ensuring transparency and opportunity for public input. So that does remain in place, and we'll talk about where that comes from. Next slide. Okay, some additional things to be aware of. For at least the past decade, the state board has routinely been approving these waivers. If you go to their website and look at their agendas, you will see a surplus, at least one school district applying for a surplus property waiver at every single meeting, usually more than one. And I am not aware of any of them having been disapproved in the past few years. In fact, I think they're generally just approved on consent by the state board with recommendations from the California Department of Education. Just because the district gets a waiver does not mean that they're bound to sell or lease property. If they market the property and they don't get any competitive offers, or they get one offer and it's not something that's competitive, then the district does not have to sell. It allows flexibility in the process, but doesn't bind the district to do anything. Generally speaking, they're valid for 2 years. And then the district can apply for a renewal once that expires. And then, of course, any decision would ultimately remain subject to board action. So again, the district's not bound to anything just because it seeks a waiver, and even if it obtains that waiver. Next slide. Okay, Okay, and just really quickly to go through the process, that was kind of the overview. Now we'll talk a little bit about what it looks like in terms of applying for the waiver. Next slide. So step one is that the district is going to prepare the general waiver request. The actual process is all online. So district staff actually go into CDE's online portal and they input all of the information. But that makes it really hard to get school board approval in advance. So what we typically do is we put together a document that has all of the information that will be input online, so that that document, which you will be looking at in the next item, can go to the school board for approval before the waiver application is submitted. And the other thing that has to happen, a couple of things that have to happen before the school board can approve a waiver application, is that they consult with the employee bargaining units and the advisory committee or school site council. The reason that requirement is broadly defined as it actually says the appropriate advisory committee or school site council, because keep in mind again that the waiver doesn't necessarily just have to relate to surplus property. It could be many, many different topics under the education code. And so districts are supposed to consult with whatever the most appropriate committee or council is. And in this case, we feel pretty strongly that it is the 7-Eleven committee for obvious reasons. And so that requirement right there is why we've brought you back today. And then once this goes to the school board for approval or for consideration, the district is also required to hold a public hearing, and that gets noticed. There's some specific requirements around that. And then the last bullet there just talks about the fact that because the school board is supposed to be the ones actually applying for the waiver, they need to take some action to approve it before it is filed. And so we typically do that through adopting a resolution that approves the general waiver request form. Next slide. Okay, we talked about public hearing. That's something that would be required at the board meeting when the resolution approving the waiver is going to be considered. So that would probably, and district staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that may be intended for later in November. Next slide. Okay, and then if the school board approves the waiver application, it gets submitted online, as I mentioned. The California Department of Education is the one that takes the first look at these waiver applications to make sure that they are complete, and usually has some follow-up questions before then sending the waiver application onto the state board for approval. The state board meets every other month. And so the next meeting, I believe, is in just a couple of weeks, the beginning of November. So we definitely would not be on that agenda. The most likely agenda that this waiver would go on to, giving timing, would be the January meeting on the 12th and 13th. Next slide. Almost done here. Okay, and then this is kind of a nuance that isn't in any of the statutes or regulations, but this, per the recommendations of the Department of Education, the state board has been approving these waivers with conditions. And the specific language seems to vary from time to time and depending on who at CDE is working on this, but they're all along the lines of the following. Number one is that proposals received be examined and declared by the district's governing board in a public meeting to allow for public comment prior to any negotiation or selection. So in other words, that's where this, even if you have the waiver, there's still got to be a competitive process. There still has to be public involvement and public input and transparency. So that's the first requirement. And the second one is that the governing board determine and select the most desirable proposal, if any, in a public meeting, and state the reasons for that determination in public session and include them in the minutes of the meeting. So putting that all together, what typically will happen is if there's a waiver, the district still goes through a competitive process. It's just not, you must select the highest price and you can't consider anything else. They would still go out for proposals. They would accept proposals from developers or whomever, might be a most appropriate buyer for the property in question. And then they're allowed to look at the terms, and typically they will go with the best price, assuming that all other factors are competitive. But sometimes you might have, 2 or 3 offers that are all in the same ballpark, but one of them is just so much more clearly advantageous or valuable to the district for some reason, that maybe that one's the one that gets picked. So that's where the flexibility comes into play. But again, because of the requirement that the determination of the most valuable proposal be stated in the minutes and stated in public session, there's no hiding the ball. There's no, going behind closed doors and making this determination and the public doesn't know what's going on. So the state board routinely approves these waivers, but they like to put conditions in place to ensure that no district, not that this district would ever do that anyway, but no district is hiding the ball and selling to somebody without going through a process. I think that might be about it. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So that's the end of my presentation. And I know the next item is discussion and questions. So I am happy to take them.
Kelly, before you do that, I wondered if you bring up an example that we kind of faced a little bit with Vintage Farm, like, even though we did settle on the highest offer, like how terms such as, timeline kind of comes involved in this, right? So you can have somebody who has an undefined timeline that might, for example, offer way more money, but have an undetermined timeline where they'd actually pay you. If you could address that without me going too much into details like that.
Sure. So that's a great example. So let's say, for example, and I've seen this happen before too, and this is not this district, but where you might have an as-is buyer who's willing to buy a property that's just, for example, a closed school site as is, because they're going to use that building for whatever purpose. And because they're doing an as-is sale and they're not going to be changing the entitlements to the property, they're willing to close in just, for example, 3 months, 4 months. At the same time, you have another offer from a developer who wants to knock down the existing building and eventually build residences there. Well, they're going to have to go through an entitlement process. And so their contingency and their escrow timeline is something like 2 years. If the offers are in the same ballpark, like very close, well, of course, the one that's going to close fast is going to be more attractive than the one that's going to take 2 years and is contingent on whether or not they can get the entitlements from the city. And that's an example where a lot of times you're going to have much higher offers for the residential development, but I have actually seen it where they've come in pretty close because of just the circumstances involved in that particular situation. I've also seen examples where you have multiple developers looking to build similar projects on the site. So some sort of residential housing, for example, and one might be a little bit higher, but they have a whole bunch of assumptions built in, every single one of which indicates that if that assumption is not true, they will be reducing their purchase price. And then you have the other one that doesn't have any of those caveats, has more realistic assumptions, and is just slightly lower. There may be benefit to the district going with the more certain offer in that case. So those are kind of some of the things that I've seen. But again, we're not talking about a district going out and saying, well, this buyer wants to pay 10 million and this one wants to pay 5. We like the one that wants to pay 5 better, so let's just sell to them. That is absolutely not what's happening. You typically will have, you'll have your appraisal, what the property's worth more or less. You have, some offers that are around the same price point, and then you get to actually look at other terms to figure out which is the most valuable, what is going to close realistically, which buyer is not going to be very obviously seeking reductions in the purchase price after you're already in contract, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing that this allows, because it's a negotiation, or because it's a, flexible process, is you can go back and say, less best and final offer from the top 3 or whatever. There's just a lot of room to maximize the value of the property and the ultimate revenue that comes to the district when you have the waiver in place. None of those things would be allowed without the waiver.
I have a question.
Yes.
You talked about the appraisals. We know there were 2 appraisals, but we don't know anything about the appraisals. They weren't provided to the committee. We don't know what the estimated value is on them. And why not? How you say you have a purchase agreement based on something? What's it based on if it's not based on the appraisals?
Well, there's no purchase agreement in place now. The property hasn't even been marketed yet.
Really, that's really odd. I thought you went through a whole thing saying that you had a sale and the gentleman
That was Vintage Farm.
Mr.
that was- yeah.
Bender said that you had a sale working.
Right.
Not for this
um,
not on this property, Leon. Rob, I don't know if you want to explain to him the process that we're putting into place right now, but we went over this with the committee, Leon, about that we were going to get 2 independent appraisals, but we were
Yes.
going to intentionally not have those appraisals available to potential bidders for some reasons. And Rob, I don't know if you want to fill in this missing
Sure,
pieces.
absolutely. So this piece of property is not up for sale currently. We're still going through with the process, right? So the next step in the process would be obtaining the waiver again. And what we want to do is be in an attempt to be extremely transparent. We thought that you guys would be the best committee to talk about the waiver process with you. So it's really, really clear. So the waiver process, again, the same thing happened with the Vintage Farm. So the waiver process was followed for the Vintage Farm. For the Carneros property, we also we feel that it's in the best interest of the district to follow the waiver process. So again, waiver is a misnomer. When you say the word waiver, it sounds like you're skipping a step, but you're getting more flexibility. Our worst case scenario is we let's say we put a piece of property for sale and we don't have a waiver process. We accept the higher bidder, but the term is so bad and they lock the property up for 2-3 years and it appreciates in value and we get less than what it's really worth. And so we don't want to do that. We want to be able to negotiate terms as best as possible for the best interest in the school district. We anticipate for the Carneros property, like we spoke about it during 7-Eleven, we are not pursuing an entitlement change for this property. So the goal would be to get the waiver. This is a process, again, it needs to go to the board, it needs to go to CDE. This piece of property, ultimately, the timeline with CDE kind of puts it at marketing and sales sometime in the spring. So ideally, what would happen is once we do go through the waiver process, we would get bids on this property and we would evaluate them as a school district. And then what we would do is we'd bring those contracts to the board in a meeting at a school board. So, and all that in transparency. So again, what we were talking about, we do not have a piece of property or this property is not for sale right now. If that answers it.
It's very, very confusing to me. I mean, I'm a real estate broker. I've been an appraiser for 25 years. I don't understand this.
So,
I mean, it's
yeah,
just,
Leon, what I explained earlier.
Wait a minute. You need to start giving information out to this committee so we can understand it. You already told us you have 2 appraisals, but you've already told us also that you're withholding them from us. So if you get a sale price, how is this committee supposed to do its job approving a sale price that you can't even tell us what the value is?
Well, there's a couple things. So again, like we spoke about, we did get 2 appraisals like the committee requested.
Could you show them to us, please?
No, we will not show them to you.
Why not?
Because then it becomes public record. And
Well, so
so
what's wrong with that?
that sets a limit on the amount of money that you can get for the property.
I
Ideally,
disagree.
yeah,
I
ideally
disagree.
we would get.
All it is an opinion. An appraisal is an opinion.
Right, Liam, but we went through that with this committee. We explained the processes behind that, why we were doing it in this particular manner, and we went through that with the committee members to explain what we were doing in this thing. And the appraisals are not even done yet. They're still in the process of doing their appraisals. Well, Leon, I don't know. I mean, that's really where we're at. And as I said earlier, we would have liked to have had all this tied up in the last meeting around this waiver process. And because we have not had to dispose of any property in this manner, we felt it was important to bring back the 7-Eleven committee to discuss this. It should have been at the last meeting. It was not. It's our fault that didn't happen. And I understand that it could be seeming somewhat confusing, but we felt, again, it was best to bring it back to this committee to have this discussion and to ultimately talk about the waiver process. And Chair Franco, it looks like you have a couple questions. Josh Schultz, and I see Eric's hands up too.
Yeah, Josh, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, I mean, the discussion that Rob just had, I think already made this point, but my understanding is the district is seeking this flexibility because they believe that's the best opportunity to maximize the value to the district of the sale process. And that going out to a hard bid on price only is likely to yield less value for the district than having more flexibility to negotiate. So I'll just state that that's my understanding of the situation. I also was going to point out, just on the point that Kelly was making about waivers, that egg code waivers are a very common process. And my recollection is the last time that this district went for an egg code waiver was when they were transitioning to by-district elections last spring. There's a provision in the egg code that would have required them to go to an election to approve those by-district voting areas. And the district sought a waiver of that because without that waiver, one, they would have had to pay lots of money for a special election. And two, they wouldn't have met the timelines of the California Voting Rights Act and would have put them under considerable legal jeopardy. So again, there's certain areas of the egg code that are very common to waive. And then the last thing I would say is, Leon, I guess just a question, because I hear an assumption from the district that it's in their benefit not to make the appraisals public in terms of negotiation. So I ask you, and I hear you disagreeing, but let me just ask you, if you were selling a piece of property that you owned and you went and got an appraisal on it, would you make that appraisal available to every potential buyer as part of the negotiations, or would you want to withhold that information? Because I hear the district assuming it's better not to have that information available to
I disagree.
bidders.
If the reason for an appraisal, it's simply an opinion of an expert. And if you have one or two of them, you've got one or two expert opinions. And that's what you deal with when you're selling any kind of property. If you're afraid to give out the appraisal's opinion, maybe you hired somebody you didn't like, or maybe you hired someone who's not adequately qualified to appraise the property. You don't want that. You want to give an appraisal that's done by an expert based on that expert's opinion, based on that expert's education and experience. Put it out. What the heck? There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, we will not be putting out. I'm happy, like because I know you have a very strong interest in this. When the deal is done, I'm very happy to come back around and say, here are the appraisals we got, and this is what we settled on when the deal is closed, when it no longer matters. But ultimately, remember, the school district, I will make a recommendation, school district staff, when we sell the property, I will make a recommendation to the school board about whether to accept whatever offers we have and move forward. Ultimately, the school board will make that decision in a very public manner. This committee will not make a decision about which offer we accept. That's not within the role of this committee. I will make that decision.
I want to make one more comment. One of the problems with selling property in this district is they have used the same appraiser for the last 10 to 12 years. Somebody calls over to somebody, hey, get an appraisal on such and such property because we think we're going to sell it. Okay, well, I'll call the appraiser. It's the same guy every time. My position is one guy is good, two or three are better. Okay, so they charge a little bit of money to do their appraisals, but at least they give you a range of value. So you need to, first of all, get out of hiring the same guy every time you appraise something, and hire a couple of other people, even if they're from the Bay Area, I don't care. But people who are qualified and educated and experienced with this kind of property. That's what you need. And that's the only thing that will satisfy me. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Leon? So I just want to be clear. So it sounds like you would be satisfied if we hired two appraisers. Is that right? So it sounds like, because we did do that. So we did make a commitment to the 7-Eleven committee to get two appraisers that were new, and that is in the process. So we are committed to your recommendation. So it sounds like that's what you're looking for from us. We did communicate that at the last meeting. So if we weren't clear enough, I apologize, but we did contract with two appraisals. We do not have them yet. And we will be, and they're brand new. They are not the ones that we used before. So we took your advice to heart and we did do that. So it sounds like you're satisfied if we do that.
Thank you.
I want to.
Chair Franco, just wanted to mention that Eric Housley still has his hand up.
Oh,
Sorry to
sorry,
interrupt.
Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Yes, no worries. I was on mute. I think, I understand and I agree that the concept, especially of getting multiple appraisals on it from Leon. At the same time, we're not the ones that are going to accept or deny this, the thing. I think tonight, when we talk about waivers, it hits home for me with the Yountville property, and even the Harvest property, of what our intentions are to try to figure that. And it seems like the waiver process is definitely the better way to go if we want to set a precedent for all of these properties, just to even get on board. Because just because someone comes through with the most money in an offer doesn't mean that's the best thing for our community. And I think that's where the waiver gives us that flexibility to make that choice. Of course, you have to, determine whether the price outweighs the other options. But I agree with Leon that we do need to get multiple bids, or that we suggest that the board sees multiple. But for our purposes, as somebody who just recently sold his house, or one of a property I had, if I was going to market, some of the houses in the valley have sold for stupid money that they don't even come close to appraising for, but it's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. So in our mind, if we know what it's worth, so we don't get below value, and we can make decisions, or I should say we, meaning the board of the school board, or whoever's making the final decision, having multiple appraisals, absolutely. But in the end, the waiver is why we're here tonight. And the waiver is the reason why we really should have that flexibility for, if we want it to be part housing, part complex, part community space, part whatever. So all of those kind of options are good. I think that it would be a reason to move forward with the waiver.
Yeah, and I'll hang on just a second. I think what has become more and more clear for me as I've gained a deeper understanding of the waiver process, because when you do hear the term waiver, you think that you're asking to do something that's not what the status quo does. But in this case, the way I understand it, that's helped me is it's what Eric is saying too. It's the flexibility the district gets in terms of the terms of the purchase and the sale, and that they're able to negotiate. And though it may not be the highest price that they choose, it could potentially be the price that has the most flexibility for the district. And I think that position puts the district in a better position to negotiate than they would be able to be in without the waiver. And again, we are just an advisory group. We're not the ones making the recommendation, I think, or determining the final decision. And I think what Rob shared, that based on Leon's input, that the district has looked at using two new people to do appraisals of that property. And so I think that shows the district's interest in listening to the input of this group, which is what is our job and what's part of our role. So I appreciate that, Rob.
Yeah, Chair Franco, if I could just add there, because prices come up a couple times. I do want to mention that the school district in our history since, like, for example, take Vintage Farm, we did for, again, that went through, I want to say 3 different times. It kind of fell through a little bit, but we chose the highest bidder each time. But when we went through that, we chose the highest bidder along with the best terms, because again, like if somebody, let's just say, again, let's take the Carneros property. Let's say we get some really solid bids at 5 million and we get one for 20, but they agree to pay you 20 years later. Who cares, right? That's not a valid bid. So the goal is to evaluate the most valuable bid. So like just putting it into a frame around residential real estate, if you get a bid on a piece of property that you own that you're trying to sell, that's 10 times the value of your appraisal, but they put 0 money down and they have bad credit, you would never consider that offer. And so all we're asking for is that same type of flexibility that you would have when you examine the bids that you have for your residential property. That's essentially what we're looking for. But we have to take it a step further. We don't do that behind closed doors, even with the waiver. We have to do that in a very public manner, in a public meeting. So we're looking to frame it in a residential real estate type mind. Like we're basically asking for similar flexibility to say, this is a realistic bid that we have that this person will be able to close versus this is money 10 years later or something like that. And they're tying into some event that will never happen.
Let me ask you a question there, Rob. Who is negotiating the sale of a particular property for the school district? Is it someone who knows about real estate and and knows what you want? You want the highest price today. You don't want to wait 20 years while someone gives you a down payment and you wait. Who is it? Who is the negotiator?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So our attorney is Kelly Rem. So it would be our attorney who specializes this, and myself, and our real estate agent. So ultimately, again, ensuring all that, it's the three of us together. So Dominic Dutra is our real estate advisor that we are using, Kelly Rem, our attorney, and myself.
So you are using a realtor?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Courtney?
Thanks, Rob. So I'm just checking for clarification. If we didn't sign or if we didn't approve the waiver, we would have to go with the highest bid regardless of the contingencies that the offer has. Like the example that you used with, it's a $20 million offer, but they'll pay us in 20 years versus a $10 million offer that will pay us immediately. So if we don't sign this waiver, we have to just solely rely on the price that they're offering, not the contingencies.
It's a little bit more than that. And Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong here. We basically would have to do the highest bidder subject to whatever terms that we come up with, right? So we would have to kind of think about like, hey, these are the pre-terms that we kind of want with it. We have to state all those things like you would with a construction bid, right? A high bid right there, right? So there's other things that come to mind too, as you kind of walk through this. When you get to the deal again with, let's say you get three people that are really close, again, you have the ability to say, hey, you guys are really close. Why don't you guys give me your best and final? And you have the ability to go back to them and say, you're all really close. Let's see who really wants it, and even create a little more competition. So again, we do this as in an attempt to be even more competitive and get the highest amount for the school district. Kelly, did I state that correctly?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The problem with not having the waiver is that the district, and I've done this once before because it was a small piece of property that the district was just looking to get rid of. They actually had a purchase agreement attached to the bid documents that laid out every single term except for the price. So that means the district is saying, we're going to close in 60 days. Well, if the district did that here, of course, a fast close is always the most desirable thing, but there may be some buyer out there who could close in a little bit more time with some, use of the property that is much more lucrative. And so if the district has to set all of those terms up front in order to get apples to apples bids, to just look at price, it's potentially shutting out a lot of buyers out there who would pay more money if they had a little more time, a little more flexibility, a little, who knows what they might come up with. And so that's kind of what the waiver really gets at.
Okay. And if we had an offer that had all of these contingencies and then at the last minute decided that they were going to hold us up, we theoretically could have this property and the sale of this property stuck in limbo for years if we didn't have this waiver that would eliminate those types of situations.
I think that's right. I mean, at the end of the day, with the waiver, the district is able to pick the best offer. So Rob gave some great examples of somebody who offers, twice the value, but they have terrible credit. They're not going to follow through and they want to close 10 years from now and put zero down. That they would just be weeded out because it's not a realistic offer whatsoever. And then, if I'm being honest, I don't say very rare, but it's rare that the district doesn't end up picking the highest offer, but there just is an ability to invite more buyers to the table to make their proposal on their terms. And then the district can look at those terms and those prices, make sure that whatever that high price is a realistic offer from someone who's going to be able to do that deal and accept that offer. So it's rare that they're looking at, 10 offers and picking one that's in the middle or at the bottom. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. If I can add a little more detail to that, which is again, just framing around Vintage Farm, some of the challenges that we had with Vintage Farm before we finally settled on a buyer. So the dollar amounts were very similar, and they were well-known buyers. All of them were. And then, but when you look at the terms, one of the most well-known buyer, they had really weak terms. Like there was a very slow release of deposits, and they were all refundable. So why would I sign a long-term contract with somebody that was not willing to release deposits to me that were non-refundable? I want to be able to have somebody with skin in the game, meaning that if this process is going to take 2 years, because sometimes they do, for Vintage Farm, we're waiting for the general plan update. That takes time. So if I'm going to sit and wait in a contract for the city of Napa to finalize their general plan update, I am going to want non-refundable releases of deposits on a very, very regular basis, so they can't pull away from it. So if they're going to pull away, I'm not going to go into the exact terms, but if they're going to pull away, it's going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars that they won't get back. And then when I go back and I remarket that property because they pull out of the deal, I get to keep all that money. Whereas those types of things you can't negotiate without the waiver. Right. So being able to negotiate that with 3 bidders who had almost the exact same price, all really well-known names, what did we figure out? We figured out really what the well-known company was trying to do is they were just trying to lock up the property. They were trying, because if you don't give me a non-refundable deposit, essentially what you're telling me is you're trying to just get an options contract to buy that property at some future date. If it works out to you, great. Then what happens is you execute it and you flip the contract. We're trying to avoid that. What we want to be able to do is get somebody who's committed to purchasing the land, right? We have the ability to choose which builder too. So it's a lot more helpful this route. So Kelly, I missed anything?
Thanks for the explanations. I appreciate it.
No, very good questions. Thank you, Courtney.
Any other discussion, questions from the committee? Any other? Jordan, is there any people waiting for public comment at this time?
No, we do not have any public comment.
Okay. Any other questions for either Kelly, Rob, or Mike around the concept of the waiver and what our role is today? Okay, with that, I want to just make sure we understand we are submitting, we are looking for recommendation for the district to utilize the waiver process in the sale of the Carneros property, and that this would be a recommendation from 7-Eleven that ultimately then goes to the board for their approval. And I'm sure some of them are listening right now. They usually are. And with that, I'm asking to see if there's anyone that has a motion to that effect.
I move that we vote to move in the waiver process.
Okay, so we have
Okay, I second it.
a motion and a second.
I second it.
Okay. Arvin, thank you. Daniela, thank you. And we'll do a roll call vote, Marie, please.
Yes, of course. Let's see here. Eric,
Yes.
Arvin,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Courtney,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Hector,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Leon,
No.
Ted,
Yes.
and Wade.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move that approval forward to the board. I believe they will be, what board meeting is it, Rob, that this will go? Is it the end of the month, right?
It's either the 18th or it'll be the one in December, I think, Chair Franco. So the
Okay,
8th.
so Then if Marie, when that's confirmed, can you send that out to the committee members so that they'll know when, with maybe a copy of the board agenda, so they'll know what board meeting and can come in to listen to that? Will you
Definitely.
guys still be in Zoom meetings, Mike?
Yes, we will be.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we will be. So we'll make sure that that gets sent out to all the committee members prior to it being going to the board for approval.
Okay, and that's not something that Eric and I need to participate in, that will just go as a document?
Yes, yes. I don't believe you'll have to participate. If that does change, I'll let both of you know, but I don't believe that's the case.
Okay, all right. And with that, I believe we're ready to adjourn. In these next couple of months, I think that our role will be quiet for a couple months or so. Is that right, Rob, in terms of the movement of the Carneros property forward and the board making final decisions about that? But the other properties that will need a 7-Eleven committee participation will not be probably coming forward till what, next summer-ish?
We're in terms of the Carneros property again, so we'll after the board takes action, we'll file for the waiver. We would go ahead and market the property. Once we kind of know more details about it in the spring, I'm sure we're more than willing to kind of report back kind of what's happening with what's going on with the property, because all of you have so graciously given us a lot of your time. So we're happy to report back around that once we know more of the details. In terms of the other properties, our interest for the other properties are we're working very closely with the city of Napa and Yountville. We're working very actively to pursue entitlements first. So the goal would be, before we bring the property to the 7-Eleven committee, we'll have that preliminary work done with a pretty well thought out plan before we bring it to the committee. I think it's pretty safe to say that we would not reconvene the 7-Eleven committee until sometime after January at the earliest, right? That would be at the very, very earliest. I don't anticipate it happening in January, probably more likely in the spring. Mike, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, I agree.
comment
Yes,
about
I
that.
agree. I agree, Rob. And I think we had committed to the committee members to provide them, hopefully 8 weeks notice, if not, if no less than 6 weeks, but preferably
Sure.
is far, 8 weeks notice of when the next meetings were going to be held, because we'll have a better idea where we're at going forward. But we would like to do something in the spring or before the school year ends, hopefully, but that may not happen. It may, as Chair Franco mentioned, it may happen and we reconvene in the summer, but we will let all of you know, like I said, as well as in advance as much as possible.
Okay, that sounds great. And again, thank you all for coming together today. I know this was not planned, but I think it was, or something we expected, but I think it definitely was much needed, and it helps the district put a process in place for the future sales of the properties that are coming forward, as Eric shared. So appreciate all your time. And is there a motion to adjourn?
File a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Arvin. In a second.
Wait a second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all very
Thank
much
you,
for your
Barbara.
time today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.